since we've done the introductions and we've gone over those
And
things.
Lance, looks like I see Dave on here too.
Oh,
Yeah,
Dave?
yeah, I'm sorry. I got myself unmuted now. So Dave Freelove, Idaho Energy Code Circuit Rider, provide the technical support and training for residential and commercial energy codes, 14 years now.
David, thanks for being on the call, and my apologies. I just was thinking you were going to have some audio difficulty and didn't want to make you feel awkward. So glad you're able to get that figured out.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. Really appreciate everyone being a part of these conversations. We'll start out first with reviewing the previous Idaho Building Code Board, and I'll leave that to Jerry to kind of give us an update about that.
Thank you. So a couple of significant changes down there. They're redoing all of their license tracking information and stuff, and that all occurred the 1st of November. And so they're, those types of transitions never go as quite as smooth as everybody thinks. So there was a lot of technical difficulty trying to even get in the meeting. Meeting started probably 20 minutes late. Most of the meeting involved board member training. And so there was a kind of a state process and a sensitivity training that they went through. And that took the majority of the meeting. When we got down to setting the dates for next year, which are on the agenda that Lance set out, there was a little bit of discussion there. Those dates are confirmed, but they are not totally inclusive. For those that don't follow the state requirements, these are meetings they are pretty much mandated to have. In addition to those dates, they have public information meetings that they do around the state, and those are not advanced. They don't put out a lot of advance notice on those. They certainly aren't subject to board approval, and we'll do the best we can to track those. And these are in different areas of the state, so those are not typically held at all at DBS, but Lance and I hopefully will be able to coordinate when those are happening. And so if they're having those in your area or you can get to them or attend, that'd be great. So just know that in addition to the dates we have published, that there's going to be some of these information gathering type meetings where they're just seeking general public input. As far as the energy code timeline goes, it will run in conjunction with the building code, which is separate for commercial and residential. Their intent at this time is to adopt the 2024 versions of all of those codes they're responsible for. But in doing that, there are things that are in the 2021 that need, to be looked at, I should say. So they'll be reviewing the 2021, but at this point, they've expressed interest in adopting the 24 and amending each as needed, to try and get the newest version of the code. And so that kind of brings us into what we're trying to do. And before I do that, does anybody have questions from the related to the board or the board meetings? Okay.
Questions. So, and then I have the presentation right here, Jerry, if we're ready to do that.
Okay. So Lance is bringing up the presentation, and we've been at this for quite a bit now. One of the challenges and what the board is trying to do, what we're trying to do as a collaborative, is if they were to adopt the 24, the assumption would be that the 21 would be adopted in the process. And some of the items in the 2021 were rolled back. And so there may be changes in the 2021 that they don't want in the 2024. These codes are not, they're not very simplistic. They can get quite detailed and involved. And I know from personal experience that the energy codes specifically draw more passion out of people, more of an interest, an attachment, however you want to put it. But I know that people spend a lot of time on this. I sincerely appreciate it. But our difficulty, as well as the boards, is trying to figure out, what the potential concerns are, what areas are being supported. And so it's not a simple question of, well, it could be, but it's not. Do we support the 2021 or the 2024? And I think if you force that general decision, we would not be able to come to a consensus. And so what Idaho has historically done is, amended these as needed. And so even though the board has expressed an interest in adopting the 2024, we still have to work through the 2021 in a process.
Albertson.
Bobby, were you wanting to ask a question?
No kidding.
So to try to respond to all of that, we've been going over the significant changes, or I have, trying to put those into presentations. But we're getting to a point where we need to start filling in the details. And so Lance and several others and I have been trying to put together a survey that we could send out to all the stakeholders to try to identify areas where we have support, areas where we may not have support, but most importantly, the areas where people need additional information. And so some of you guys follow the code in depth as I do, and they understand, all of the various components. Some people don't. So it'd be pretty hard to ask them, do you support the entire thing? And it's like, well, maybe they support this, and this, but they don't understand this. And for us to be effective with our time, and more importantly, your time, we're trying to isolate those areas. Where do people need information? What areas do we need to, provide data or statistics or analysis? What are those specific areas? And so we tried to put together a survey. I think it had 20 questions on it. But in order to make that quick and easy and online at the same time, making it so that we can collect that data without somebody sitting there, keeping score on every one of them. We're trying to do it through an online server in a fillable form that would consolidate the data. I will say right off the bat that, one of the things that we're trying to avoid is, trying to force a decision or make it look like we're asking a decision. That's not really our scope of this committee. We're here to gather and disseminate information. The decision making is, obviously totally in the board's hands, and we don't have that authority to do that. So, we're going into the beginning of the year. We've got potentially one more meeting this year. we'll need to have a game plan, or I'd like to have a game plan by the February board meeting. And at least be able to say, you know, we have consensus or general consensus in these areas. These are the areas that, you know, I don't want to say these are areas of concern. I would prefer to say, you know, these are the areas that we're still working through. You know, and just be able to present that to them and kind of give them a heads up. And the logic would say, well, why are we going through all of that effort? You know, why don't we just let the board do it? And, you know, it's important to remember that the energy code is just part of their responsibility. Building code board, or the building codes themselves, are, you know, a big item. There's a lot of discussion and temporary rules around fire safety, and so they do have a full plate. But one of the, just speaking from experience, you know, in the past, they've pretty much told us, and I've heard the same from the legislature, is that the stakeholders, the industry, should come together and provide us with some consensus. You know, it's not, you know, we don't know if we have time to basically do what this collaborative is doing on the board level, and certainly not at the informal level that we try to maintain. And so we're not trying to do their work, but it is important that we try to come together as a group, as stakeholders, as representatives of the industry, and be able to go to the board and say, you know, we do care, we're involved. We spent a lot of time and effort putting this information together, and this is where we're at. And so we're not dictating to them. We're just saying, you know, these are the things that, you know, this is what we have consensus on. This is areas where we're still working, so that as they're traveling around and trying to gather additional information, they have an idea of, you know, what they need or what they would like. So with that, I'm gonna go into the presentation. We do have a survey that I'll try to briefly go over it, and then Lance, I'll let you add to it. I think what we did is I tried to put together a presentation today, highlighting some of the big items. It's not an all-inclusive list. It would take us days to do this if we line item it. So I tried to hit some of the high points, and we put together a survey, but trying to merge the survey with the online, you'd either have to be quite informed of the code already, which many of you are, or you'd have to open up the code book to understand what the question is. And so that's the survey and the presentation were kind of designed hand in hand. So if you could open either the presentation or your code book and look at it, the survey as you're going through it, hopefully that would make more sense. It really comes down to, you know, how big the survey is and how much time it would take. And so this is not an attempt to override the discussion, or, you know, try to condense it. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is figure out, what information do people need? What do you want? We've got a couple, 3 meetings left before it goes to the board. Is there specific areas that people want to discuss or want me to, you know, provide more detail on? And so that's kind of the intent of the survey. It's not a, you know, it's not a yes or no. It's like, where are we, you know, where do we put our efforts in the
Hey,
interest
Jerry.
of everybody's time? Yes, sir.
Jerry, this is Charlie. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you and others know I do have to leave. I'm going to try to come back in 20 to 25 minutes. Hopefully I can still get back on if you're still in the meeting, but I have to disappear. I have a conflict, but I will try to be back. Sorry.
No problem.
May I ask one quick clarifying question before you jump into the thing?
Sure.
Do we have any direction from the board on if we're just looking at the core part of the code, or are we looking at the appendices? Usually the appendices are a point which causes a lot of angst amongst people, and oftentimes people states don't adopt the appendices; they just adopt the code with. So if we had that direction in advance that ignore the dependencies, that would lessen our work.
That's, I don't think I can give you a legal answer on that. The appendices are a backup that if you're, if you're doing something, you have a reference tool, you have, the design parameters. And so there are ways to use that. But as far as formally adopting them, I don't know where we're at currently. I know jurisdictions used to adopt them by reference or through their ordinance, but I don't know. I can't give you a legal answer on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jerry, we're not allowed to adopt the appendices anymore for the energy code for the statute.
Thank you, Jason.
So it would have to be a state adoption of the appendix to allow us to do it.
Which, I think if we had consensus, we may be able to do that line item, but that would be very presumptuous of me to say that. That would be a board decision.
Well, that helps quite a bit given direction. If we just ignore the appendices because of the statute, and it makes our lives easier, less work.
Thank you.
Well, I think the
so-
statute is in reference to the cities, right, Jason? Like the jurisdictions can adopt the appendices, but potentially
Yeah,
through 2024 code adoption, the building code board could look at the appendices. And that's, I
Yeah,
think, Jerry,
they-
where you're saying that you're not clear on, they don't have a statement as to whether or not they'll look
yeah,
at
the
it.
cities and counties cannot unless the state does adopt an appendix, then we can. We'd have to do the same.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So when the survey comes out, Charlie, hopefully you're still there. When the survey comes out, there is going to be links to this presentation that I'm about to deliver, and links directly to the ICC codes. And so you'll be able to pull the code up. The link will take you directly to the codes, so you don't have to search for it. But it's probably going to be difficult to go into any detail on the survey without looking at either the presentation or the code. We may also do these surveys in two parts. This first one may be more generalized. And the second one, potentially could be more detailed. So it is a process. I don't have all of the answers. We're trying to come up with the most fluid way to do it that provides us usable information. So Lance, did you want to speak to the survey?
We can talk about the survey afterwards, Jay,
Okay.
if you want to go ahead.
So I'm going to go ahead into the presentation and just a couple of things. Go ahead. On this first one, and I don't want to beat anybody up, please don't feel like I'm targeting anybody, but our collaborative is not authorized to make any decisions. And so we will not be taking votes. So please don't confuse the survey as a ballot. It is simply a survey. It's been designed all the way along to be very informal. We encourage open conversations. Some people provide really, really good data. Some people have an opinion. All of that is welcome, because if we don't provide a platform for doing it here, then they will go to, and they may anyway, take that to the board or to the legislature. And so, we try to make this as inclusive and transparent as possible. We want everybody to feel free to communicate here. So having said that, when you're addressing the collaborative, please make your comments to the group and not at individuals or other groups that may not share your opinion or perspective. And because we want to hear, if there's another side or somebody has an opinion, we really need to consider that. And so we don't want to get into an open debate or, add, a lot of emotion to it. We're trying to systematically go through information and gather the best that we can. Next page. As far as myself, I've been doing this for a long time, and you know, I've been involved with the code development. I've been on the international committee and stuff, but I also try to practice all of this in you know what I do and kind of what I am. And so this is my latest gas bill at my house. This is a production built house built in 2016. And you can see on the top line there where they've adjusted my level pay to now $28 a month. $8 of that is a customer service charge. And so my gas bill is $20 a month, of which more than half of that is my hot water heating. So I'm heating my house with gas for about $120 a year. And so, you know, when we work on these codes, we need to understand that they do matter. You know, and we can do things that really do pay off for people. And so this is my house. I like to share information of the things that I do. And so if somebody has an interest in how we got here, I'm happy to share that. Also notice that even though they reduced it, I still have almost a $300 credit. So things are looking good for the gas bill for a year. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, I'm seeing. So this is broken into two sections, and I thought about color coding the 21 and 24, but just know that this first portion of this is going to be items on the 21, and then the second section is the 24, and you'll see a break in between the two, and I'll mention it when we switch over to the 24. In the survey, it's better defined. The two code sections will be highlighted so you can see, you know, the line items under their respective codes. So the first one is I try to do all of this in order, and there really is not a priority when it comes to what saves the most or potentially saves the most. This is basically, you know, going through the book and pulling out some of the highlighted items. The first one will be an administrative, and there's two things in here. I think most jurisdictions have migrated to digital plans, but the code didn't reflect that, and this just says that yes, by code you can submit digital plans. The second one is a little more direct, because when people submit their construction documents for permitting, they don't always specify whether they're using the UA, whether it's code basics. And that also carries over into potentially could carry over into the inspection process. And so if somebody is using the UA alternative and they've done something less than code and traded it off under the UA, the inspectors need to know this information. And so we're trying, you know, the intent is to find out from the very beginning, is this a prescriptive house? Is it UA? What is your compliance path? And that will need to be stated on the construction documents. Next slide. The second part is they're asking for a change in the energy efficiency certificate. This is something we've been doing for a while, but they are asking for additional information. We want to make this certificate usable, transferable down the road. And so it's asking for, you know, equipment information and other things that may get lost in the process. So we will need to develop a new certificate. These get posted where the current ones are, and there's some directions on there, you know, if it doesn't fit on the panel of where it needs to be. And I'm not trying to read all this to you, but these are the additional tables of what's being required on the certificate. So as you can see, if we're using PV, there's a section of that where all of that information needs to be listed. And also on the ERI, if you're doing a energy rating index or a PERS home, you'll have to indicate the score on the certificate. This is kind of getting into the meat of the changes, and I apologize for the small print. Again, if you were looking at this document on your computer, hopefully you can read it, or at least be able to expand it. If you scroll down towards the bottom, and then expand it if you can. So climate zones 5 and 6 are down towards the bottom. And this is one of those items that I said, you know, we need to identify, because in the 2021, they moved the ceiling insulation to R60 in both climate zones 5 and 6. And then in the 2024, they put it back to R49. And currently on the books, we have an amendment for climate zone 5 to do R38. And so, you know, this is one of those items that obviously that we need to be aware of, right? The changes in the wall insulation were also to give us the option of doing exterior insulation. And so, you know, we had, it's just basically adding an option. It's not increasing the R value as much as it's allowing for a different location. Eve baffles are, I think Dave could vouch for me on this. These things are a pain from an enforcement, and when we go out and do our, you know, our walkthroughs and our audits and stuff, this is an area that is definitely needs to be addressed, and I'm glad that they, you know, finally put some clarification in the code that says, you know, if you're using eve baffles, this is how many and this is where they need to be. So I think this one is important. This is basement walls. This is not, by the way, this list is not inclusive. There's a lot more to it. This basement wall section, I'm only dealing with the exceptions here. And we have a lot of homes in the state. We don't do a ton of basements in the Treasure Valley, but they do a lot of them in eastern Idaho and quite a few of them in North Idaho. And we've always had an exception in there for unfinished basements. And so this section of the code now says, if you want to use this exception, you have to meet all of the following conditions. And so this is another way to clarify, you know, easily clarify, is it truly unconditioned space or not? And does it qualify for the exception? The air leakage testing in 2021 is for Idaho is still going to be 3 air changes per hour. All of you guys that have been involved in the energy code in Idaho for a while know that this was amended last year. And we are using the visual checklist in lieu of testing. It doesn't prevent the testing, but it gives the option of, you know, the testing becomes optional, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There is an exception for heated garages. I didn't put the code language down there. We also have an amendment that deals with heated shops, garages, and areas that workspaces that are not intended for occupation, I think is how the wording goes. If you want, I probably should add that to our future stuff so everybody is aware of that piece of it. Okay. This is an air sealing table. These are everything that's listed in blue in both the 21 and 24 are new language. And so now that we are using more of the visual, the air testing list, it's important to have this clarifying language in there. And so this is just to make people aware that we've added a lot of stuff. I've read through this. I agree with almost all of it. I think the old list was a little lacking in some areas, and maybe not in, when I say lacking, that would include clarity. So I think this is really helpful. And there will be similar changes in the 24. So there's quite a bit that's been added to that visual checklist. This is a new requirement. Jason, or if somebody else on our collaborative, maybe Jerica could help me with this. It says now very clearly that all electrical and communication outlets need to be air sealed. And then it gives us a standard for an air sealed outlet. And I went online and looked at the outlet itself and how it's being constructed. I have an assumption, but I don't want to use it. What I'm asking for is, are they now requiring this specific product, or can it be air sealed or this particular product?
It's the
Jerica?
latter. So we've really gone around and round on this particular requirement on how we are interpreting it and giving our ICC interpretation. What we think is meant by this, and what the proponent has agreed to, is that you can either air seal. So if it penetrates the building thermal envelope, you can either do your typical air sealing, caulking it, whatever you might be doing, or you install these NEMA OS boxes. And the code language is clarified in the 2024 to read that way.
Yes, thank you, appreciate it. Next slide. There's also some clarifying language in mechanical systems. Most of it revolves around ducts, and ducts located in conditioned spaces. What do we have to do if we're putting them in, say, the roof assembly? What do we have to do for them to be considered inside the conditioned space? And so, this is clarifying language. We do know from the modeling that we've done that this is a big item. Getting these ducts isolated or moving them inside is probably one of the bigger potential savings. And so it's nice to have some language in there that says, this is what you have to do for it to be considered. This is another item that will probably generate some questions, and it requires that the ventilation systems be tested, typically with a flow hood, or there's different ways to do it with manometers and plates and stuff, but it's saying these need to be tested, and the concern in Idaho is going to come back to the same concerns we have with blower door. Do we have sufficient people to perform these services in our outlying areas, because we are developing a code for the state? And so this makes sense to me. I know from testing thousands of these things that the install quality can have a huge bearing on how well these things work. And so it makes good logical sense to me. Try not to put my bias out there. But at the same time, do we have sufficient people to actually perform the testing? So just something to be aware of. Yes.
Yeah. Jerry, yeah, I'm a big proponent on this too. So, according to manual D and J, you're supposed to have your system balanced, and just a flow hood from the installer of your HVAC system would be able to do that. Would that meet this testing requirement?
Absolutely. The same people that are certified to do the balancing could easily test these. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is so really every HVAC company should have one of these. So hopefully that wouldn't be as big a hurdle.
Yeah.
as we.
I agree.
add
I'm
the
just
blower
pointing-
door.
Yeah, I'm just pointing it out that, you know, the training that Dave Freelove provides, the air balancing and blower door, you know, it'd be great if all of the same people that do the balancing could also do the blower door. Just be aware that, you know, we're talking about, you know, something that's been problematic in the rural areas. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
And I'm just trying to, I'm not really taking a position as much as I'm just trying to make people aware.
And Jerry, this is another section in the 2024 that has some additional exceptions and things like that. So
Yes, I seen that. Thank you.
Yeah.
This has to do with interior and exterior lighting systems. You know, again, all of this is geared towards saving energy. And I don't, you know, like I said, I'm not trying to take a position on any of this. I just know that this is probably one that we're going to have some discussion on. The energy rating index, this got modified when we re-amended the 2018. We had picked what we had thought was an equivalent number. And then when we redid the administrative rules and the code, we just put it back to what the code numbers were. And they are currently 55 in climate zone 5 and 54 in climate zone 6. And I'm not sure if I put these on the 2024, but they stepped down one more point in the 2024. In talking with the HERS raters, I think, Jerica, we talked about it briefly. We felt that this was a good achievable target, but we haven't really gotten a ton of feedback on this particular piece.
And the nuance in the 2021, Jerry, is that you have to reduce those points by an extra 5%. So really
Yes,
the reduction
under
in
the
24
yes.
means nothing.
Yeah, under the additional energy requirements that are in I believe they're in the they're early on in the section. They're either in the administrative or
C4.
early in section 4.
Yeah.
That talks about that.
And that's removed in 2024, so you don't have to reduce anything, but it kind of makes these numbers not quite accurate.
Yeah, and then
It's
you'll
really
see when we
it
get
was
to
not
the
for 21.
you'll see when we get to the 2024 that there was an additional column listed, and I'll talk about that when we get there. So in the 2021, by the way, we're wrapping this up. These are the last 2 slides for 21. One of the big potential savings in there is that 5% that we just talked about. And so you have to, as part of the energy code, you have to do all of the requirements. You also have to pick an additional efficiency options. And there are 5 areas to choose from. And here's kind of those areas. And so I think you have to pick 2 of the 5, Jerica. Is how that works.
Just
one.
Just one.
Just one. Okay. So you pick one of these 5 options to go along with your energy code. And of course, it would be really helpful to have this as part of the permit in the plan review process. So next slide. These are the first 3 options, and these are the second 2. And again, you know, one of them is dealing with the ducts, you know, getting those inside the conditioned space, or the equivalent of getting those inside the conditioned space. So, you know, they recognize that as a major factor. Any questions on the 2021? Okay, we'll proceed. The 2024, I don't have near as many questions. Just to reiterate, if we adopt the 24, we're kind of agreeing to adopt the 21 in the process. We're not just going to avoid all of those requirements. So anything that isn't addressed in the 2024 would still apply unless it's been changed, amended, or removed. So the first one is the fenestration or the insulation table. And again, they rolled back the ceiling insulation is probably the biggest one on the list there. So they put this back to R49, and then, you know, we have the amendment in the state at 38. Next slide. Or climate zone 5. There is some additional areas in the air sealing. Again, I'm a big proponent of air sealing. I've done quite a bit of it, and these all make sense to me. I think the more detail we have in that area, the more helpful it would be. And just moving forward, we know that, you know, code verbiage isn't the easiest thing for everybody, especially tradesmen, to get. And so we had talked about potentially, you know, making a little informational pamphlet that would kind of generalize this a little bit, and something the tradespeople could use. So that's down the road, but just I do realize it's a lot of words. And this is continuation. Again, all this blue is new language, and all of this is in addition to you know, the blue language that we talked about in the 2021 air sealing table. More language in duct systems, again, addressing some of the, maybe the shortfalls or just some additional exceptions on what's considered inside conditioned space. This one has to do with all electric homes that are using electric resistant heating, and it is limiting that to 2 kW. If you're using 2 kW or less, you wouldn't be required to have a heat pump. If you're using more than that, then you have to, you know, install a heat pump, and it's providing the location for that. This is something that we'll probably have quite a bit of discussion on. They also, in the 2024, they're now doing lighting allowances. For those of you that work in the commercial side of this has been around forever, and it's now working over into the residential. But it is outside of the controls, the lighting allowances are on the exteriors. So it's exterior lighting.
And only multifamily.
And multifamily, thank you. Yeah, okay. This is that slight adjustment on the ERI, dropped it down another point. But most importantly, they've added another table or another column to address ERI houses that are using OPP, which is on-site power production. So this could be solar thermal, PV, you know, and I'm not going to try to list all of the potential on-site power production, but it basically it's saying if you're using that, you can't offset or trade off major portions of the home. You would have to, you know, meet these new levels. And it's a way to ensure that we still have a reasonable, efficient building envelope, that we're not trading off, you know, basic insulation just because we have a solar farm in our backyard. We still want houses that not only are efficient from a cost perspective, but that they're also comfortable and safe. And so this is another way to address that. There are backstops in place. If you're using a performance method, ERI or performance methodology, there are still minimums that have to be met in a lot of those building thermal areas.
And Jerry, if I may add something here, the big difference between this and what was in the 2021 is the 2021 limited you to 5% of renewable energy towards your ERI score. Yes. And This is saying you can use as much ERI or as much on-site renewable as you want towards your ERI score, but you have to meet that lower score.
Yes, because potentially, and I've been in homes where that score was single digit. So
Yeah.
just from renewables. So. Okay. Thanks, Jerica.
Reviewing the next slide.
Yes. And then again, we're getting down to the end of this. Thanks everybody for their patience. The additional efficiency requirements are now, can you blow that first section up? Can you expand that first paragraph? So the new section says that you have to select not less than 10 credits from 2 measures. And so I tried to just put an example of this table on there, but it's multiple pages. This is a very, very long table. Go ahead and scroll down a little bit. And you can see for different measures. So all of these measures are for 0.2.1, but you can see they may actually change from climate zone. They may give you more credit for something in 6 than 5. So you select your areas from this table now for a total of 10 minimum. And then where before we had 1 of 5 options, we now have 11 options, and you're allowed to kind of mix and match as fits your design and budget. And so these are the first 5 options, and obviously there's a lot more detail than I can provide on a slide. And then the second one, so most of these we're familiar with. That more efficient distribution is inclusive of the ducts inside. You know, obviously we know that better air sealing, better ventilation can have some benefit, but they're introducing some new options. But and those are a lot of these are first things that we haven't had before. And remember from the last meeting that the national builders, you know, were favorable to more options. They wanted more options, so it's helpful to remember that. But we're now allowing, you know, the offsets for energy efficient appliances, the demand response, and whole house lighting efficacy. So there's some nice options there. And I was just kind of flipping around in the tables, and my house as it was built, the 2 of the things that I did would give you my 10 points. So this isn't something that we can't do. We're probably already doing it. It's just clarifying that it's now required in code that we take these additional steps. And I believe that's it. So again, we're going to try to provide some brief instruction on the survey, a link to this presentation for reference, and links to the 2021-2024. I want to make one last plea for assistance. Jerica, thank you very much for the clarification on those items. Those questions will come up in the board review. And so if we can jot that down, you know, maybe be able to have that in as part of our information, that would be really, really helpful. I don't know the best way to go about moving forward other than it's time to start making you know, some commitments, I guess. And I'm not trying to prod anybody one way or the other as much as I'm just asking, is there anything that I can do or Damon can do or anybody else in our stakeholder group is there something you want data on, or cost analysis, or, you know, pricing? You know, this is the time to get that out. We don't want to go to the first board meeting and have them throw 20 things at us that said, we need information on all of this stuff when we potentially could have addressed it prior to that. And so I'm really asking everybody, you know, please comment on the presentation, some of the stuff that I've talked about, maybe something I missed, but try to give us some direction. We're going to try to do this through the survey. If our surveys are just lame, I'm going to blame it on Lance.
I'm the messenger, guys. That's my role. I get shot at, so it's okay.
Because in my brain, it all fit in perfect columns. No, it doesn't. And I don't want to infer that. We're a group, we're a collaborative. What works for everybody, please feel free to comment on it. And if you've got a better idea, we truly are all ears. We really would like to know, is there a way to consolidate this information? But it would be so nice to be able to go to that first board meeting and say, we've reviewed this over the past year. These are areas that, warrant discussion. These are areas that, that we are interested, that we think would be appropriate. However, we want to phrase it, other than just saying, we took a vote and this is what we decided, because we can't do that. So, please help us out, do what we can. We have set the next meeting tentative in December, and I think we will probably go ahead and do that just so that we have an idea. We're trying to get this survey, and it may be, again, a short one followed by a more detailed one, but we'd like to review the information coming back from our group, and then look at that as potentially having a meeting in December to delve into some of that.
I think we have a question too.
Gary, yeah, wondering, would it make sense for us to have informal being that we're not officially proposing them, but informal suggested amendments for the 2024? And then like if people in this group brought up what they thought should be changed, and we could discuss it and have a pros and cons, and then it kind of give us a starting point of it'd force everyone to get into the raw language, and we'd have a robust discussion to talk to at this board.
Yeah, I would caution against drafting language or anything that would look like draft language. That's the board and Doppel's responsibilities. But ideas, if we pitch it as an idea, yes, by all means, yes. We want to hear that from people, both sides, concerns, potential concerns, and or, things, that are helpful, or,
Hey, Jerry, I have a question. Do you know if Idaho at all put in for any of the DOE money that was available for states that updated to either the 21 or 24? There's kind of just general implementation money that was available.
I don't know. Historically, we haven't.
I would assume not, but
I was the energy program manager for over
Well,
a decade.
there's a couple, lots of millions of dollars available for states that committed to updating. But I was just going to point out that if we did do that, which I would assume we didn't, but there are some pretty strict rules about amending the code. If you're going to take that money, you can only amend it. I think it's 1 or 2% less efficient than the base code. So something.
Yeah, Jerica, I don't think the state
I don't think they
signed the letter for the formula funding.
They did not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have time. I'm open for comments.
So Jerry, this is basically you're wanting to know for Energy Code Collaborative suggestions or energy codes or others also. What's your take?
We can start with the stuff that I highlighted today. And the initial survey, basically what we were trying to do, but it came off kind of confusing, was we would just, on each one of those slides, you would just have the option of general is supportive, you know, opposing, or need more information. You know, and what we were trying to do was not, again, not force a decision, but just try to find out where we have consensus and identify potential concerns.
Do you know if we have another group working on basic, the building code portion?
I'm gonna defer to Jason. I hate to throw you under the bus, Jason, but I historically have not. I've kind of had, I've been told to stay out of that area, so I don't know. I don't follow the building code.
Yeah, I think they were gonna hire somebody to present the changes to them. I think it was probably Steve out of Colorado. I think he was gonna,
Oh,
Thomas.
yeah, Steve Thomas, I think was gonna do a high level. These are the changes from 21 to the 24 on the building codes to the building code board. They were trying to schedule that. But historically, I mean, this board needs things brought to them because they're just kind of a decision maker when the information's presented. So like Jerry said, it's just really important that you bring the important things to this board with potential compromises or options or something, because otherwise they kind of just spin. It's just been how it is. There kind of has to be like someone who spearheads some of these changes and then works through Doppel and the board.
So what what they're have expressed interest in doing, Jason and the rest of the collaborative, is they need help. Obviously, there's nobody at Doppel that has energy code experience, and so
Yeah,
I wouldn't say they're relying on us, but historically we've kind of taken our roadmap to them and at least give them a starting point, and so they appreciate our involvement. And if that that type of a roadmap is going to have to come from somebody, it's probably going to be
yeah, having done this before and being on the board before, right? We spend a lot of time on the residential provisions and a lot of times on the prescriptive table and a lot of time on the testing stuff, right?
Yes.
I'm
And
just,
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, in the past, they've gone through each section that indicates that there's been a change. And I just wonder, if we should maybe assign some of these chapters or sections to some of us and review it and see if there's anything more that they may bring up.
Well, I'm looking at just the prescriptive table, and does that say R30 in the walls? If you're not using continuous insulation, that'll be a biggie to bring up.
Yeah, how are you going to get R30? I think R23 is oftentimes the greatest you get in walls.
Have to add exterior.
Well, it says R30 or 20 plus 5 or 13 plus 10.
Yeah.
Or 20 continuous, and we know the continuous is always an argument too, right? I mean,
yeah, it gets into the jam depth, and yeah, there's all kinds of things that have to be addressed in the design. I'm not trying to resolve anything today, Charlie. And I just want, I don't know the best way forward other than just say, these are the things that we've looked at and discussed, and if we have areas of consensus,
Yeah.
and or areas, I don't want to say concern or opposition. I'd rather just say these are areas that we're working on, and those areas I do think that we need to have some help on those very specific areas. I mean, I could give you a list of what I think, but that's just basically my opinion. I'd much rather run the whole thing, or as much of it as we can, past the, the collaborative, and then
Okay.
base our forward approaches off of those comments.
I was just curious if they would be able to, or not be able to, but consider bringing up each change that they were concerned about from maybe the Home Builders Association. And I just wondered if we should have some commentary for those also.
Yeah, I can try to address that, Charlie.
Yeah.
They
Well,
don't have
you
time.
need some help. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. How
Yeah.
could we help you with that?
Well, if I put together a roadmap and the consensus are, this is what we'd like to present to the board, even if we don't have everything resolved, and I don't think we should anticipate trying to fix everything. We're not gonna know until we get into the process, but maybe we can get 75% of it, off of there, so
Yeah.
we can focus on those areas, and then be able to have a candid conversation within our group, of how are we going to address something a very specific, or who wants to be involved in that, so that we can try to address those very specific things. I think we're a little early in the stage. The board was very generous with their time and allowed me to address the changes to the 2021 earlier in the year. I think I got an hour and a half, which is way more than I thought. I asked them if they would like something similar for the 2024, and they referred back to that roadmap, and they, wanted me to help them with that roadmap. I just don't want to be giving them the impression I'm speaking for the entire group. I don't think that's fair to the stakeholders, so we're trying to get some feedback. I'll do the best that I can, but I'm going to keep pleading for, more involvement, more engagement.
Yeah.
And you guys all have my info. I'm happy to talk to people individually on the phone or through email, but I'm just saying the clock's ticking.
Yeah.
So,
And if
so
we don't
Jerry,
have, something together by February, if we're all scatterbrained in February, it would just be so easy for them to say, well, when you guys get it together, come back and let us know. I just don't think they're going to open themselves up for, just a non-structured, line item. I know they're not going to. I think they've already fairly clearly told us that. So
I think you've got a comment from
so
Brett.
so Jerry, just a quick question then regarding that. Do you feel like the board is going to, or DOPL, I guess, going to put together any kind of a collaborative committee, basically that whoever wants to work on it under basically the direction of DOPL to make this move forward? Because I know they do that with like electrical and other trades. Do you think they're going to actually put together something like some meetings where they go around the state, or any kind of direction like that, where it's actually going to be under DOPL's direction?
So you asked quite a few questions in there. Let me know if I forgot any of them. The first thing is they've always relied on our collaborative as the best information source. So would they put together a subcommittee? They might on some very specific topics, but not on the code in general. It's too much to ask. I mean, they're basically looking at saying, you guys, this collaborative are the stakeholders. We are the industry experts. What do we want? And that would be the basis for them. The roadmap is something they need before they go out to the state. They'll need that roadmap. We'll need to say, yes, this is where we're at, or yes, we're okay with this. And they would use that as their, the basis to get it rolling. So, I think we play a very important role, but it's important also that we, understand that we're not gonna win on every one of these things. You know, we have to, you know, kind of look at the, you know, some of this stuff on line item basis. Doppel does not have, they did not replace my position when I worked for DBS. Doppel does not have an energy person on staff. And the building code board, I don't want to speak for them, but anybody can go online and look at the makeup of the board. And, you know, they come from all different perspectives on it. And so, you know, there may be some knowledgeable people on the board specific to energy codes, but more or less they represent segments of the larger industry.
Yeah, and those are good points. I was just wondering, as far as like, for example, Amy Lorenzo put together some stuff for the electrical. Not that she has necessarily the specific knowledge of electrical, but she facilitated it throughout the state. I just wondered if there was going to be anything in, you know, that way, I guess, because the thing that we've found with other trades and things is we just don't want to put all this stuff together and then have somebody come in at the 11th hour and say, yeah, I'm not okay with that, and I don't feel like I had any input. You know what I mean? That's the things that we always try to avoid. I guess that's where I was trying to head with it, is just make sure that everybody has their input in it.
Yeah, I can address that. So one of the things that the board is really good about is they're very aware of the collaborative, and we've done extensive outreach. And so if someone pops up out of the blue, probably one of the first questions they're going to ask them is whether they brought that up to the collaborative. And if they were on the mailing list and didn't attend or weren't involved, obviously there's some, you know, question there as to why didn't you, you know, you had opportunities, you have other avenues. Why are you waiting till now to address that? So we do play that role. We, as hard as we try, we may miss somebody, but they will probably refer them back to the collaborative because we have more in-depth. Either we already have that information, or we're a good source for obtaining it.
Okay.
Brett, I mean, I think while we're, you know, you're bringing up these points and you sent that question and Jerica had some information, you know, the next thing we had set up for was to give you a chance to speak. You know, is there anything else from IDABO perspective or your perspective as a building official that you'd like to bring up in this meeting, or?
Yes. Well, so we appreciate the opportunity to speak at this, but we also appreciate you know, putting these collaboratives together. We definitely want to be involved with them because we have a lot of people that are heavily involved in the codes, obviously on the enforcement side typically, but even beyond that, we have some members that are architects and other things. And so we appreciate that first and foremost. But as far as from IDABO's perspective, and even cities, I think they fall right in line with this as well. I know our city does. We definitely are on the page of trying to get the energy codes, you know, or keep the energy codes, I should say, moving forward. There's several things, and I don't want to basically reiterate what Jerry said, because we agree with what Jerry has said, and we don't need to just continue down that path anymore, because I think Jerry did a good job explaining it. But I think from our perspective, one of the things is we look at, you know, and one of the main hot topics or hot buttons right now at the legislature is affordability. And one of the things that we see as building officials and inspectors and enforcers, we see a lot of in the building codes and the energy codes, we see a lot of times that people complain about, you know, the energy code costs more money to the consumer, or the building code costs more money to the consumer. And one of the things that we always want to do is try to weigh that out and really see where the payback is. And energy codes is one of those. Energy code is a thing that, to Jerry's points, and even a little bit beyond that, you start getting into, if we don't have energy codes, we start having issues with HUD and different lenders or funding or grants, or there's a lot of different things. And on top of that, the affordability piece is that if somebody builds a home, and let's say we've, cut every kind of building code out that we can, and we're down to where we're at right now, which I feel that's where we are right now today. Then what happens is we end up with a home that is not affordable going forward. To Jerry's point, if your power bill is 10 or 15 or 30 or whatever dollars a month, that is, in my opinion, affordable. If you get a home that is having power or utility bills that are really high, we're definitely concerned, and that's why we would appreciate keeping these energy codes and push forward with the energy codes, is to allow for some of that affordability that we try to basically work with on the building code side. So we're for sure, as IDABO, we're for sure in favor of the energy codes and adopting them. Obviously, we would, we want to be a part of this collaborative, the meeting, as far as getting all these pieces and things put together. But we definitely support Jerry's efforts. We support just the energy code as a whole and the current adoption. We also dig into technologies. In other parts of the code, we start seeing new technologies of how things are insulated or how things are built or how things are wired or whatever the case may be. And if we don't adopt the new building codes, energy codes, and further down the line, we start missing out on that. We miss out on safety. We miss out on energy efficiency. We miss out on things that inspectors don't really know where to go with it, right? They get a little bit confused, like, well, there's these new technologies, but how does the code view them? We run into that all the time. So from an IDABO perspective, that would be our stance. We definitely want to push forward with the energy codes and the building codes, and want to continue building upon this and working obviously with the building contractors associations and others that are affected by this, that all the way trickling down to the public or the consumer. So I would say that we would love to see all of the codes also be adopted for the 2024. To some of the points that have already been made regarding the energy code, along with, if we go with the 2024 energy code, 2024 IBC, IFC, IRC, all of those, they complement one another and they don't conflict. Because when you have these codes put together, and I don't want to speak for ICC, but it's the same with every code that's established, they all work together hand in hand. And if we have a 2018 energy code and a 2024 IRC or IBC, we can really get some very confusing codes. And on the enforcement side of it, it becomes confusing. And it goes all the way down to the person installing it or purchasing it or whatever the case may be. So we would want to stay on the 2024, or go to the 2024, I should say, that would stay with the IBC and the IRC of the 2024 as well. We also feel like, as far as the energy savings, we've done really good since 1975. We have had, we've achieved 30% energy savings since 1975, and maybe even better. Jerry could probably speak to that better than I could. But the point is we've achieved a lot of things in the last, since 75. We've achieved a lot, and we want to continue doing that. And going along with that, what I said a minute ago regarding the new codes, we definitely want to continue going down the road of adopting the new codes, so where we can continue to build on that and have the new technologies included, and have, not skipping codes, because it causes confusion for builders that are even from out of state as well. So anyways, that would be our perspective from IDABO. I don't know how long we planned on this meeting, but I hate to dig into it any deeper than that. I think that's kind of our stance at a high level overview, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here and give our 2 cents and be a part of the collaboration.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, we do have that information about savings over times, that's available. And as we move further down the road, I mean, at some point, we're gonna probably end up, in front of the legislature. And this is where going through this collaborative, we can condense that information, make it very visual, put it in graphs. We have all of that opportunity going forward, and I know how to do all of that, been doing it for a while. It's just at this point right now, we just want to make sure that, we're on the same page as much as possible and find these outliers. I did miss part of your question. I'll be brief. I know we have somebody else that wanted to speak. The builders at this point are kind of doing well. I shouldn't say the builders, the BCA, the building contractors group, are doing all of their voicing all of their stuff through Ken Burgess. And so I've made the offer. I used to attend their meetings on a regular basis. That offer is still open. If their group wants me to come talk to them, I'm happy to do that. But right now, everything is being voiced through Ken, and they agreed that we're kind of still in the discovery phase of this. And so, they're a good partner. I mean, we may not have, I shouldn't say we're not always in agreement on everything, but they have been communicating. They're not, they will talk and they kind of have to, they need to be part of the process. So I consider them part of our larger stakeholder group.
Right. Yeah. And we've worked with Ken extensively as well in the past. And so, yeah, we can appreciate that. And we appreciate their stance on a lot of it. We really do. And even though we may even have some things that are maybe in opposition, we still, I mean, they bring a lot of good value and a lot of good points to things. So yeah, we appreciate Ken and who he represents as well. So yeah.
And Jerry, if you remember, I think you and Dave kind of helped mediate some working sessions with the BCA and some of the building officials to actually work through some of this last time. That's the only way we got through it on the 18.
Jason, you weren't supposed to bring that up. I think that just created PTSD.
Dave left, so I'm cringing twice as hard for both things.
But
yeah,
sometimes it takes face to face, right? Going through it.
Yeah, so what happened with that, I promise I won't, I'll get through this really quickly. Is we basically brought the two groups together, and it's like, these are the two, biggest groups of influencers. Let's just bring them together in one room. Very entertaining. At one point, we just agreed that maybe we should just have the two groups and work with the two groups. And so I kind of worked with the contractors, and Dave worked with the building inspector side of it. But, in the end, we have a lot of consensus, more consensus than we, had previously. And so we were successful. I thought it warranted the work. And I'm still committed to making that happen. Even though Dave and I probably both told each other we were never doing it again, but I'm committed to this and have been, for a long, long time. And, I look at all of the mentors that I followed, in this energy field, and I just don't want to see 40, 50 years of work go down the drain. I think we can all agree that, it all needs to move forward. We may not get everything we want, but we can make progress.
Is there a way we could get feedback from Ken on, I presume there's certain items that most builders are they're already doing. I mean, it's not a big deal to them. They might be, because the cost is always a concern. And we've heard for every $1,000 stat thing thrown out multiple times. But I wonder, are there items that might cost $1,000 that the builders are already doing, and it ends up not being that big of a deal, that we could kind of focus on first and get some easy agreement.
That's the intent of this survey. And so if we have something, you know, if we have a very specific item on them, they're very open to it. So they're, in all of my dealings with them, they've never drawn a line in the sand and said, this is a no. Well, very few items where they just say, this is a no-go, you know, it's a non-starter for us. Most of the time they're open to, give us information, show us what you got, you know, let us look at it. And so at this point, I've already kind of outlined some of the concerns, but we don't have anything in writing, and I think they're a little reluctant to do that. But yeah, we will definitely, you know, be aware of, you know, I call them potential spots, but really I just like to refer them to as there's things we're going to need to work on. And we have a pretty good idea what they are, but we don't know for sure. But they are open to it. Conversations.
Yeah, I think that would be good. To Jason's point, I think it was as much headache it was, or even hassle. I like the idea of the last approach. Not that we're trying to vote on anything here at this time. I feel like that could really be good to have, you know, everybody in the same room and visit with, you know, Ken or others. It doesn't have to just be him, obviously, but have everybody in the room and really get down to where the rubber meets the road and discuss it. I think it'd be great.
We may have to do that, and I didn't want to get too deep into the timeline details, but once that draft language is introduced, you know, once IDABO submits that, you know, we're going through the rule change process, then if we do have sticking points, obviously we have a way to deal with those, you know, at the time that's appropriate. And we had those meetings last time right up until we were still talking about a week before they were submitted. So, yeah, we'll stay on top of it.
And just to kind of follow up, Bret and Greg, both on both of your comments. So the survey that I've crafted, kind of funny, but I was looking through the email list and found out that Ken unsubscribed. So I guess that he was tired of hearing from me. So when I send out the email with the survey, I will specifically send it out to Ken, asking for him to send it to his contacts. But one thing I would just ask, you know, if there's anyone in your area that you know as far as a builder, if you could send it to them, ask them to fill it out, ask them to share it with anyone on their team. Because, you know, the more we can look at it from a side-by-side perspective, I think that the more fruitful that meeting would be when eventually we get to that point.
Yeah, so the survey, one of the questions, it by the way, your name is optional on that. So if somebody wants to say something, but they don't want to, you know, they want to avoid any potential repercussion, they can still fill the survey out. But we're asking them what part of the industry they represent. And so that allows builders independent of their organizations, or anybody independent of their organizations, to still respond. And so it'd be great to have certain, you know, feedback from people that are identifying as builders or part of the construction industry would be really helpful.
So one more thought, there's several things in the IECC that actually don't cost much at all to implement, but it does change the way you do things. Good examples would be like the air sealing that you always bring up, Jerry. I mean, it really doesn't cost, but it does mean you have to schedule your subs and make sure that one sub doesn't circumvent what you've already done. Another example would be ducts inside the design space. If you do it up front in your design and figure it out, it doesn't require much change, but then if you do it after the fact, it could cause significant changes. It might be significantly hard to do, or like if you're trying to adapt a design and you're like switching to open web joists would be a pretty big deal, where there's other ways you could incorporate in. So I'm wondering, is there ways that we could provide resources to help people with just doing things differently? You know what I mean? Or giving them low cost solutions, or, you know, in ways to do things like support, so that way we kind of lower the barrier to doing it, so that way it's not as much of a resistance. Like give them
Yeah,
ideas and support.
The training that I provide is open to all participants. I've done a lot of hands-on with tradesmen, helping them get that. We see it different from a design perspective versus implementation. And so one of the ways, the appropriate response to people asking those questions is we have training available and it can be modified to address specifics. I've been doing ducks inside training since 2010. And so, yeah, we try to identify that. It's probably the difficulty is just getting the message out that the training is available and it's free. Just opening up that channel so that they can get the information. But most importantly, we want to make sure that they're not using that as an excuse and saying, well, now I have to do all of this and I don't have a clue how to do it. And there's nobody around to teach us how to do it. And so it said, oh yeah, we've had code update trainings and task specific trainings for as long as I've been, associated with both HVAC and the energy codes. So it is available. We do get it. And the training is modified each time we do a different code section, or we figure out a better way to do it, that gets edited into the latest training. So I try to keep my training updated every time I offer it. So.
Well, I know we're running a little bit long, and definitely I'm trying to cut anyone off. So if there's a question, please stop me. But Emily, I know you're still on the call, and definitely want to be respectful of everyone's time. But we last time incorporated the stakeholders corner discussion. We'd like to keep that going. We invited Emily from the city of Hailey to come on and talk about their perspective on the energy code, and basically, the opportunity is open to anyone in these meetings to be able to talk about, highlight successes, highlight frustrations. But Emily, if you can turn on your mic, what things did you want to talk about today from your perspective in the city of Hailey?
Yeah, thanks, Lance, and thanks everyone for all the information. Really here to learn and absorb as much as possible. So I don't have too much to share. I guess I will say that the switch, or I guess the legislature that came out last year, definitely affected us at the municipal level in terms of what codes we had adopted. We had really adopted a series of stretch codes above the 2018 code that was working really well, we thought. And then with that legislature, that basically removed all those stretch codes, and I think made things quite simpler for the builders. But in terms of the other trade-offs with sustainability and energy use and load demand and things like that in the system locally, that certainly changed things. I will say we have some issues. I know, like Lance, in your email, you brought up ice dams. That's like something that we see some of on certain developments and projects, oftentimes with kind of out-of-state developers who are not as familiar with like the importance of really making sure you select a contractor who's doing their due diligence when they're doing those attic and ventilation space insulation installations. But that's not like a broad across the city type of scenario that's happening. And then I guess the only other thing that was interesting this year that would be great to see addressed in the adoption of the 2024 code was that we were interested in adopting one of the appendices of the 2018 code just for just at the commercial scale and for solar ready provisions, just trying to do whatever we could to equip some of these more spaces, especially in our light industrial district, where we're seeing a huge demand for structures and uses like self-storage. Just it's crazy. People have a lot of stuff and there's big demand for self-storage units. And so we thought that could be a good kind of way to encourage more renewable installation in those specific builds. And we consulted with some local contractors just about, what would the cost be for this? Would it be by adopting this code requirement to just install conduit and solar ready provisions, would this be putting like an undue burden on builders? And the feedback by and large was no, like it's cost way more to do that down the line than it is to just require that from the outset. And so we felt confident about it, had been in contact with some folks at the Idaho Building Code Officials Board or Idaho Building Code Board, and they basically gave us the response, consult with your city attorney. And so we did that, and kind of a lot of back and forth. And we initially got the yes, go ahead, you're good to adopt the appendices. And then a day later, we got a big old no, you cannot do that. So that was pretty disappointing because we're just trying to like do what we can to, and that's really my role and job, is looking at like how can we make our city more sustainable and also implement resiliency measures where possible. And so just being a more rural jurisdiction, resiliency and kind of like transmission outages is something that we do think about and try to prepare for and plan for. So that was disappointing, and I hope that there can be some more discussion in terms of the opportunity to adopt those appendices. I'm really excited to see the code update about electric resistant heating and just kind of limiting that based on kilowatt and size and whatnot. And then kind of back to, I think it was Bret who was talking about just the importance of these energy codes and kind of how we go from deciding what codes we want to adopt and developing those to the actual like kind of on the ground lived experience for residents. We're seeing a lot of growth in Hailey right now in the multifamily building sector. And there's also a huge demand for, I'm trying to move away from the term affordable housing, because I think that's a little bit oxymoronic at this point, but community housing and deed restricted housing for the local workforce. And with that, comes, I think, a responsibility as a city to make sure that we're not setting folks up for, not unsuccess in the future, or just overly burdensome utility bills by not doing everything we can to make sure that their spaces are comfortable and efficient and are really built durable and to last. So yeah, that's kind of what we see on the ground. And then I guess too, some of the inspection piece of it too, we're pretty limited on work capacity, which I know a lot of rural communities in Idaho are for just inspectors. So just looking to see a balance of like the opportunity for the local jurisdictions to kind of adopt code that fits in with their local circumstances and also their local very like specific goals as a community, because I think those are very different across the state. And I know that in Blaine County and Hailey we're quite different than some other communities in Idaho in terms of like where our priorities are at with energy use, and we'd like to be able to operate in that space, but at the same time balancing that with who do we have available for doing building inspections and what's their capacity, and not making it overly burdensome. Just doing some like brief looking at the changes in the 2024 code. I was also excited to see that there's some, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm still kind of new to this world, but it seems like there's some new requirements for documentation that is also exciting, because that just helps us to be able to track what's happening better. And I'm a big proponent of collecting data and using that to make decisions. So that's all I have. Hopefully that's helpful information, but excited to be a part of this group. And I just feel like everything that's been discussed today, I've already learned a lot, and I think it will be exciting to jump to this new code, but a big jump from 2018 to 2024. There's a lot there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Hey, Emily, can I ask a quick follow-up question? So
Certainly.
I know that you had mentioned, like balancing local jurisdictions, being able to adopt code, and then you brought up about the solar example, but is there anything else in particular you're thinking of that comes to mind for examples where you would like to see a little more wiggle room? Is there anything else for the energy code specific that comes to mind? And if you don't have an answer right now, I'm not expecting it, but it might be something that's good information for us to have moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say any of like the air testing, we definitely have workforce around here who is able to test for that and does test for that in kind of voluntary situations. But yeah, that's something that we're certainly supportive of. That's the first thing that comes to mind, though.
And then Jerry just brought up the point too that we look forward for Jerry to be able to come out to the city of Hailey to host a training. We appreciate you guys being willing to host us at that. So, and if there's any recommendations on who we should get over there, that would be on December 12th. So
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that too. If we could chat more about that offline and just what we can prepare, what we can do to prepare best for that and kind of who we can bring together, I think that would be great. But yeah, grateful, Jerry. You seem like a very, just yeah, kind of endless not wealth of information and knowledge. So excited to have you.
Thanks, Emily.
You brought up a
Appreciate
really
it.
good point, Emily, about air testing and wondering. So, I mean, they said visual inspection is the current amendment, but what if jurisdictions were allowed to spot check? I mean, so if the funding of the air testing was paid for by the jurisdiction, not by the builder, so then that would remove the concern about the cost of air testing. And then if jurisdictions were allowed to say, we're going to do random air testing, so that way a builder never knew if the inspector is going to do an air testing or not. And then that way, if they fail the air testing, then they have to do changes, and then the next round of testing is on them. But that would kind of give an incentive saying, oh shoot, I'm not opposing the air testing because of the cost of the test. I'm opposing, so that way you make sure that they're still trying to meet the intent all the way through. I don't know.
Currently, there's nothing that prohibits somebody from doing testing, but we get into some real legal issues about people being in the house and, without the builder's knowledge. But, we can't just walk in there. We have to have their permission. Even the inspection is, with their knowledge and permission. So, one of the things that has proven to be most effective is when we can actually make it competitive, where the builders are competing against each other, saying, I can build 2-5 homes all day long, right? And it becomes kind of a source of pride for them, and so that's where we try to facilitate it. Is the visual test as good? I think testing always is the only way to prove a point. But using the visual list and doing it right, the experience tells me that we can make significant gains that way. Remember, when we're doing amendments, they're not forever. And so when we took that requirement out of there, there was good reasoning for it. Mostly because we didn't have a plan B. It's like, well, what if the house fails? What do you do? I mean, you can't, there's just certain things we can't fix once the house is built. And so it was kind of a homework assignment that said, okay, here's the logistics problems. This is the testing issues. This is the what ifs, show us how to address all of these and we'll entertain it again. And so I look at all of those as, not a no, but as just something that as I've said, something we need to do more work on.
You could always require the air testing at a earlier stage in construction, and then have it maybe hit a lower value or so, and then they have time to fix it.
Yeah, those are all good options. We just, we didn't have a single, objective when we were looking at it. And so, we versus risking losing, the entire code or bigger portions of it, we just said, let's take that out, let's refine it, we'll bring it back.
Well, unless there's any other comments, I know that we're running long on time, so thank you for everyone that stayed on. Really, really appreciate the comments from, Greg, Charlie, Brett, Tess, and Jerica, and Emily. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts from the city of Hailey. Please tell your team and Jessica that we said hi and that we appreciate your support and what we're doing. I will send out that survey. It'll be an email format. The link to the survey will be inside the email. Jerry's presentation will be included, so we'll continue forward on that. The Code Collaborative meeting for December, I have that tentatively scheduled for December 5th, just because of the holidays that month. Is that a day that is a problem for anybody? Because we will talk about the survey results in that meeting. If you're able to come back, which would be great. So December 5th, is there an issue with that date?
I'm good with it.
Yeah. Same here.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to getting back on the 5th, and hopefully we can just really dig into results. I will share that with the team, and maybe we can come up with something a little more creative, colorful to keep the eyeballs on the screen and everyone awake. So really appreciate everyone being on today, though. Thanks so much for your time. Jerry, anything else we need to cover?
No, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the comments, feedback.
Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your week. Happy pre-Friday.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys
Thank
too.
you.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.